friends, my goal with this lesson is to actually get through it without saying the wrong thing or making a mistake. Sometimes, some ways, I end up getting tongue-tied, so sorry for that. We are going to work on rounding numbers just a little bit to give you a small review, and then we're going to work on some of the harder aspects of rounding numbers together. So this lesson really is just going to start out very basic. So let's say I have the number 674. 674 monkeys, 674 beans, 674 whatever. But to make this number easier to work with, we've been asked to round it. And we're going to round this number to the nearest 100. We don't have to have an exact amount. We just need it rounded to the nearest 100. Many of you are thinking, awesome, I can do this, no problem. That's okay. We're going to walk through this step by step just so that you can see the process for when we get to some of the more difficult problems. So the very first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create a place value chart. A place value chart. Separate out my place values, and I know that I have the ones, the tens, and the hundreds. My directions are to round to the nearest 100. This is the place value I am rounding to. This is the place value I am rounding to. All right, well, I know that if I have a number and I have 6 in the hundreds, that literally means 600. So I'm going to write the number 600 down here. And when I look at this number 674, it's a real number, it's a whole number, I know that that number comes between the numbers 600 and 700. Those are the two hundreds that this number comes between. What I have on the ends of my number line have to match what I'm rounding to. Rounding to hundreds. This number's in the hundreds, this number's in the hundreds. Next, I have to look at what am I using to make my decision? Well, we're going to use the place value to the right, which for us today is tens. The place value to the right of hundreds is tens. This is our decision-making place value. Helps us decide. We don't even have to look at this 4 anymore. So we know really truly what we're going to do is we're going to round 670 to the nearest 10. Sorry, to the nearest 100. See, that's what I was talking about. My goal was to not do that. Now, a fun way that I like to do this, because I don't know about you, but I think roller coasters are interesting. I don't really like them, but they're interesting, and they're more fun than just doing a regular number line. I'm going to take and I'm going to draw a roller coaster track between 600 and 700. Here's where we would start. Here's the end of our track. Now, many of you may or may not know the feeling when you get to the top of the track. You kind of have this little pause right before you start going down the track to the finish. So right here, we're going to call this the magic spot, and we're going to put a magic number there. The magic number is going to be halfway between 600 and 700. Every single time this number, when we're dealing with hundreds and tens and ones, will have a 5 in it. So halfway between 600 and 700, when we're counting, is the number 650. So once our roller coaster car makes it to 650, there's no way it can roll backwards to the start. You actually get that excitement and that building of going to the next section of the roller coaster. So, what comes on the roller coaster tracks between 600 and 650? Well, I can see that we're using our tens to help us decide. So I'm going to count by tens on this number line. For me, it's easier to work from 650 back and then 650 forward. So I'm going to go in here and put 640, 630, 620, and 610. Then over here, I'm going to put 660, 670, 680, 690. Now, I'm looking, and my number that I said I was going to put on my track is the number 670. So here I am. I'm going to put 670 on my track. Now, I know that it is already past 650. So my person in here, they're headed downhill. They're having a good time, and they're going to the next spot. It is closer on a number line to get to 700 than it is to get to 600 from 670. So 670 rounded to the nearest hundred is going to be 700. So far, so good, hopefully. All right, stay tuned. Are you ready for part 2? Let's use the same number, 674. 674. Now we've already rounded it to the nearest hundreds. This time we're going to use 674 and we're going to round it to the nearest 10. So 674 to the nearest 10. It's still the same number. We're still going to use the same process, but our answer is going to be a little bit different. So let's start with making our place value chart. Ones, tens, hundreds. We are rounding to the nearest 10. We are rounding to the nearest 10. Here's our tens. This is what we're rounding to. The place value to the right is going to help us make a decision. But before that, we need to look at, okay, so if this is 674 and we have 7 tens in there, then when we make our roller coaster, we need to make it with 670 on this side. And the next 10 up from 670 is 680. Notice the difference. We were rounding to the hundreds here, so we had hundreds, 600 and 700. We're rounding to the tens in this one, so we have to have tens here and here. We still have our hundreds, but we're not showing anything in our ones place value. So now we have to figure out, what is our magic number? What is our magic number? What comes halfway between 670 and 680? Well, I know halfway between 70 and 80 is 75. So halfway between 670 and 680 is 675. That's going to be my magic number. Again, we're rounding to a different place value, so our magic number is going to be different than in our hundreds. This is tens, so our magic number is going to have a 5 in the ones, because remember, our ones are what help us decide. This is our decision maker. One place value to the right is our decision maker. So now we count backwards by ones: 675, 674, 673, 672, 671. And you have to pretend like those are equal distances apart because, All right, 675, 676, 677, 678, 679, 680. The number that we're working with is 670. We're going to leave that 4 off as a 0. So we're looking at, the number that we're working with is 674. See, this is what I'm talking about. I make mistakes. 674. So we need to look and see where this falls on our number line. 674 falls right here on the roller coaster track. This means it doesn't have enough momentum to get up over that top to go on to the next part of the track. It's going to fall back. So it stays 670 because that is the place value. That is the number with the place value of 10 that is the closest to our number 674. I'm going to draw my person. They're kind of sad because they don't want to go back. But that's all right. So when we have 674 and we round it to the nearest 10, we use the ones as our decision maker. For this specific number, we would round to 670. Notice that when we say we are rounding to the nearest 10, we have a number in the tens place. When we rounded to the nearest 100, we had a number in the hundreds place. Everything to the right of the number we are rounding to becomes a 0. Everything to the right of the number we are rounding to becomes a 0. All right. Now, some of you may not need a number line to do all the rounding, but you probably need the place value chart. There's a fun little rhyme that you guys probably learned early in elementary school. 4 or less, let it rest. That means if your decision maker that you're using is the number 4, 3, 2, 1, or 0, you're going to leave the place value that you're rounding to alone. It'll stay the same. You've let it rest. The rest of that is 5 or more, raise the score. By 1. So then again, that comes to this. If your decision maker is 5, 6, 7, 8, or 9, then you're going to go ahead and raise the place value that you're rounding to by 1. So 7 plus 1 is 8. So that's where we get the 680, is we raised it 1 place value. Our number on this one was a 4 or less, so it rested back on 670. I hope this helps you out just a little bit and doesn't give you extra confusion. If you need to talk about this, please let me know. I'm going to go ahead and make another video that's going to be about rounding decimals. So if you liked this one, tune in, and I'll see you next time.